In the mid-2000s, the marriage of pocket computers and multimedia devices was still underway for the masses. Sure, there existed products like the HP iPac and Dell Axon series, as well as other Windows mobile masterpieces from Samsung and the like, and even the iPhone once you got into late 2007, but at almost no point prior to 2010 were any of these devices affordable to most people outside of the used market. As a result, the portable media player was still very much its own category of product, as made famous by the original iPod. By the time the phoneless iPhone, known as the iPod Touch, hit the scene in late 2007, the market had hit critical mass for discount tiny screen players, some of which were obvious ripoffs of Apple's offerings, but others had actually matured by this point into their own product. This is the story of the Onda VX878, featuring original footage from a never-before-released overview of the product, filmed all the way back in 2008. Let's take a look.
I'll pick this up and check this out.
The VX878 was the smaller variant of the original and wildly popular VX858, sporting a 2.4-inch 240 by 320 LCD screen. It's impossible to overstate how small this device truly was. Even the comparatively older iPac 4150, which would go on to replace the Onda for me within a year's time, made it look small, and that device looks positively dinky when compared with today's portable technology. Still, the screen as I remember it was serviceably bright, and the pixel density was excellent for the time, measuring in at around 166 dots per inch. The VX878 was so small, in fact, that Onda actually had to move the volume controls from the device's face to its right-hand side, where they actually remain to this day on most modern mobile devices. The top side features a combination power slider and hold switch, as well as the headphone jack and mini USB port. While I unfortunately no longer own the player, I do still have that same mini USB cable and Onda EP50 earbuds that it came with, which I should mention don't actually sound all that bad. They do still work. Speaking of stuff that came in the box, well, I'll let my 13-year-old self explain.
Then we have our handy dandy, super duper, I think I said that wrong, super duper handy dandy little Chinese packet. Now inside this packet there was the CD, but I've removed that because it isn't Chinese. There's this little card that I don't know what it is. There's a warranty card that I got because I purchased it from mp4nation.net. And then there's your instruction manual, and yes, that's in Chinese. So we can set that aside. Next, there's an instruction manual, another instruction manual in here. Whoops. Alas, this one, which is in English, is not for this player.
And for those of you who might have been wondering, that was original audio from the video, pitch corrected so that you know that it's me. I suppose we should take this time to talk about the filming setup. In those days, my only camera, video or otherwise, was the Nikon Coolpix S1, which I still own actually. What do you know? The thing still runs, albeit in the same silly, glitched out state that it did a couple of years after I first took ownership. The camera records videos at either 320 by 240 or 640 by 480, both at a blistering 15 frames per second. While continually adjustable focus was an option for video mode, it made a lot of audible racket in the recorded soundtrack and had a tendency to wander, so I always selected the fixed focus mode. At those lower resolutions, it did not matter anyway. Speaking of, now that middle school me has had a chance to switch over to a close-up shot in the 2008 version of the video, it's time to do a quick tour of the interface. Kind of. Unfortunately, my amateur hour recording strategy did not have the foresight to ask the camera to take metering with the player's screen on, so most of this footage is pretty washed out, but one can still kind of get an idea of what's actually going on here. The device's interface was laid out to at least slightly resemble that of Apple's offering, taking heavy inspiration from their iconography. At the time, Onda was still very much in the process of finding their footing and moving away from the clone market, so this was very much a latter period transitional device in that respect. The VX878 is based on the Rockchip RK2608A chipset, which was able to decode MP3, WMA, and reportedly even FLAC files, although I did not get a chance to personally test the FLAC playback functionality at the time. If that is in fact true, then the 878 was a truly forward-thinking device. To help compensate for the limitations of the small earbuds that were popular at the time, Microsoft PlayFX was available to provide equalizer and fake surround features, both of which I noted using in my original review. ID3 tags are recognized, as were any LRC lyric files present in folders containing the music. Despite being the smaller unit, the 878 still featured a rear-firing speaker as well as a headphone jack, so I fully reject the excuse of device footprint as an explanation for the removal of the headphone jack in today's mobiles. If a player this compact could still find room for one with budget-oriented Bush administration-era technology, there should be space to spare on today's giant rectangles. The photo viewer was slow but functional, and images looked great on that tiny screen. Video playback was somewhat limited, but the included software package was able to convert mainstream formats of the day into something that the little player could run without choking, and the results looked just fine. One neat trick that the video player did have was the ability to decode FLV flash video files at up to 320 by 240 resolution, which coincidentally enough just happened to be the format that YouTube used in those days. The device didn't have any networking capabilities, of course, but downloading the videos using a browser add-on was as easy in 2008 as it is today, so loading the device up with one's YouTube backlog for off-the-grid viewing was certainly an option. I didn't demonstrate it for long on camera, but the Onda VX878, like most portable media players of the era, was equipped with an FM radio receiver. Just like the FM chips in modern smartphones, it used the headphones as an antenna, so if you didn't have them hooked up, the reception went to zero. The feature worked well enough, but there was a fair bit of interference, especially when using the touchscreen, or if the backlight dimmed for power savings. Nonetheless, the feature did work. The final media consumption option on the Onda was an application called Texel, which was the device's built-in text file viewer. Unlike the 858, the 878 inverts the colors for a more pleasant reading experience, but I could never bring myself to read much in the way of text on a 2.4-inch screen, although the words were sufficiently crisp given the device's high pixel density for folks who were determined enough to take on the challenge. Speaking of value-added features, there was also a brick game, similar to Tetris, which could be clumsily operated using the device's volume keys. But between the controls and the fact that there was no way to pause the game and continue later, I never really found it to be as enjoyable as it otherwise could have been. From here, I basically just spent a few minutes stepping through the device's settings and delivering some closing remarks. When I list out my historical, primary mobile devices, I almost never include the Onda VX878, not only because of how briefly I actually owned it, but also because it always played second fiddle to the Palm M500. The 878 was incredibly tiny, but I didn't carry it with me everywhere like I did the Palm or even my Nikon camera. After all, I can only carry so much equipment on me at any one time. And it wasn't until the following year when I finally got that iPack where the inevitable convergence of these devices' functionality finally started to take place. with the HTC Diamond joining the club 2 years later to introduce a mobile phone to the mix, and the Samsung Epic not long after that to finally deliver a camera experience capable of starting to consider replacing a point-and-shoot, finally ending the quest for ultimate convergence, and of course it's all history from there. As always, I trust that this trip down memory lane proved to be interesting, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. Thanks for watching.
So here, for size comparison, I have a rather large ancient dictionary.